I used to think house sitting for these massive properties miles outside the city was easy money. You lock the doors, settle into the silence, and for a few days you enjoy the absolute privacy of an isolated, secure home. But then you hear it. A single floorboard creaks under a weight that shouldn't be there, and the illusion of security just evaporates. Your mind immediately starts racing to identify the source. You tell yourself the wood is just settling, or it's the wind, but the absolute silence of the house makes those excuses feel thin. Have you ever stood perfectly still in a dark room, holding your breath, just waiting for the house to make that sound again? This sudden shift from total comfort to total vulnerability is the core of human-centric horror. It's the moment you realize that walls and locks don't actually change the fact that you're exposed. Most horror relies on things that aren't real, supernatural monsters or loud, sudden noises that make you jump for a second. But that fear is fleeting. It doesn't follow you home after the movie ends. True terror is grounded. It's the realization that you are not alone inside a space you believed was entirely your own. It's the person standing on the other side of a door you thought you locked. When you look at these accounts, you see a specific sequence of events, a pattern that storytellers and real-life experiences use to turn a familiar room into a trap. By following this pattern, we can see exactly how our sense of safety is systematically pulled apart, layer by layer. It always starts with a sense of normalcy. The environment is established as perfectly still and familiar. You feel safe because nothing has given you a reason not to. Then come the minor deviations, small details that don't match how people are supposed to behave. These consistencies are easy to ignore at first because they don't look like an immediate threat. Take a man named Gregory, who was alone in a quiet neighborhood during a heavy winter. It was pitch black outside when he heard something that made no sense for a Tuesday night. A grown man outside, singing jingle bells. Gregory opened his door and saw a man standing in the glow of the porch light, wearing a thin coat in the freezing cold. He wasn't looking for an audience. He was staring straight down at the welcome mat, completely focused on the song, ignoring Gregory entirely. The singing didn't stop. It looped. When Gregory finally went upstairs to bed, he heard the voice again. Only this time, the man had moved to the backyard and was singing directly up at Gregory's bedroom window. This kind of discomfort paralyzes you. The behavior is wrong, but it's not yet an attack, so you stay frozen in the space between confusion and panic. To stay calm, your brain starts inventing logic. It tries to explain away the anomalies to maintain the feeling that you're still in control. When a 14-year-old boy, home alone, heard a faint tapping coming from his backyard, he told himself it was just a tree branch hitting the siding of the house. He wanted it to be the wind. But that rationalization can only last until the noise displays clear intention. The tapping didn't stay by the tree. It moved along the side of the house, and eventually it migrated directly underneath the floorboards. Someone was in the basement, tapping on the ceiling, following the boy's footsteps as he moved through the living room. When the threat proves it is sentient and watching you, those logical defenses disappear. You're left with the raw realization that you're being hunted. This leads to a moment of realization. It isn't a loud crash. It's a slow, sickening discovery that confirms your worst suspicions. If you're responsible for someone else, a child who can't protect themselves, the weight of that realization is much heavier. You can't just hide. You have to act. A babysitter named Chris kept telling a 5-year-old that the scratching sounds in his room were nothing. He even checked the closet to prove it. But when he came back a few minutes later, the sliding closet door, the one he had just closed, was pushed wide open. Then came the visual confirmation. The boy didn't say a word. He just pointed to a tall laundry hamper in the corner. Tucked into the narrow space between the hamper and the wall was a grown man, trying to make himself as small as possible. We see it again with a man named Dan. He thought his niece was just having a nightmare until he stepped into her room and heard a high-pitched, deranged voice whisper, "Aren't they just so special?" That moment of realization changes everything. The house doesn't feel like a shelter anymore. It feels like a cage you're sharing with a stranger. The final part of the pattern is the lack of closure. If the threat is caught and the story ends neatly, the fear goes away. But true horror leaves the situation unfinished. When the police arrived at the 14-year-old boy's house, the intruder was gone. But they found one detail that changed the entire experience. The largest knife from the kitchen block had been taken. And when Dan watched from a neighbor's porch, he saw the man who had been whispering to his niece simply walk out the front door and disappear into the night. He was never found. By leaving the intruder free and the motive unknown, the story refuses to let your brain move on. It keeps you in a state of permanent anticipation. This pattern takes the very idea of home and turns it into something foreign and hostile. Because there is no supernatural element to blame, your mind has to stay active, filling in the terrifying details the experience left out. These stories work because they rely on real-world mistakes: a jiggled handle, an unlocked deadbolt, a window left cracked. You start to wonder, did I actually lock the back door tonight? You don't need ghosts for a nightmare. You just need a quiet house and the realization that the silence isn't actually empty. The next time you're alone and you hear a sound from the other side of the house, don't just assume it's the wind. Pay attention to the patterns, and whatever you do, don't stop looking. Subscribe to Night Witness.